All right, welcome into another News4Jags podcast. I'm Jamal St here alongside Justin Barney. Justin, we've reached the post-Super Bowl time, so the season's over. That means we're counting down to next year.
Chiefs won the other night, and just disappointing because the Jags could have been there, and we're not there. But nonetheless, it's you kind of know the barometer, what you gauge now, what you're up against. Patrick Mahomes is only get better. AFC is loaded with quarterbacks.
A lot of them.
And Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, but Mahomes is still the guy. You've got a blueprint around, you got to build around. Although I did get a kick out of the Chiefs' victory celebration when Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes were saying, nobody picked us. We're underdogs. And they were counting us out. Okay, with a $500 million quarterback, one of the best tight ends of all time.
Right.
Come on. Who said the Chiefs were underdogs?
I'm sure some people said a few not nice things after the Tyreek Hill trade, but nobody was completely counting them out. Let's be serious. Well, with the Super Bowl over, it's officially pointing the direction toward the offseason, full steam ahead. That means first it's free agency, but before we kind of dive into the free agents, we wanted to do our first go-around of a mock draft for the Jaguars. Draft, of course, is later on in April. The combine hasn't rolled around yet, so a lot of moving pieces, but just an early look at how we kind of see this Jaguars team kind of attacking things to fill some of the needs, because the goal is to be in that Super Bowl. Jaguars are considered one of the top 10 teams with the best chance of making it next year. In order to do that, you got to fill some of the holes on the roster. So we'll look at some of the rookies, kind of talk through this. So we're going to run the PFF mock draft simulator. We'll run two of them at the same time, and then we're going to take some of the players. We'll talk about a few of the ones that are available from there, and then land on our one kind of consensus selection for the first 3 rounds for the Jaguars.
Yeah, and it's so different this year. I mean, we're talking the last 2 years, Jags picking number 1. Didn't anybody wanted. Pick a player to draft. Now it feels so different. I mean, your first pick in the draft is coming probably 8:15, 8:30 on draft night.
Right.
It's going to be probably at 10:30 on draft night, so it's going to be a little bit different than we're used to. And so you're not talking number 1 pick in the draft, so it's a little bit different this year.
It's very different
for fans and for us.
Yeah, we got to figure out what our coverage is going to be. We were before, yeah, we'll just stay live on Channel 4 until the Jaguars pick, and now we're like, wait a minute, that'll be a long time. Do I have that much to say? Do y'all want to hear me talk that much? I don't know if I want to hear me talk that much. But, that's the fun of draft night, and it's the more success you have, the later you pick, unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles, who are in the Super Bowl and still have a top 10 pick. So, it should be fun. The Jaguars should still be able to get a very good player in the first round and hopefully in the second and third rounds. This is an interesting draft class. Some good quarterbacks at the top, but as you kind of go through it, it's a little thin in a few other areas, like wide receiver, not necessarily the best class of wide receivers, maybe not the best class talent-wise overall that we've seen compared to some of the ones in the past few years, but definitely one that should have a lot of movers and shakers unless the Chicago Bears shock the world and draft a quarterback number 1 overall. So
before we jump into our mock, if you're just looking at the Jaguars roster right now, pre-free agency, pre-cuts, pre-transactions, what is your number 1 position that you're targeting with this first overall pick? Assuming Jacksonville stays at 24, and knowing what we know at this very minute, a month before the NFL late season kicks off, where is your number 1?
So not projecting what I think they're going to do at all.
What's your number 1 need for Jack?
Has to be tight end because they don't have anybody. I mean, it has to be unless you're just ready to roll out the football and say, Luke Farrell, you're our guy. It has to be tight end. If I'm not projecting a thing, tight end is the number 1 need on the roster because they have one guy under contract. So that's plain and simple. I mean, if they bring back Evan Ingram, which I think is largely the expectation of everyone involved, then that eases that. But I still also would say that tight end is up there because you still need depth and talent behind him. And I don't think Doug have the personnel to run as many 2 tight end sets this year as he would like to. If you go back to his Philly days, he was running 2 tight end sets almost 50% of the time.
Dan Arnold was your guy alongside Evan Ingram, and we know what Evan did.
Right.
Fantastic year. You hope he's back in Jacksonville, but you don't have that personnel to really, no offense to Dan Arnold, a great character guy in Carolina, one of the men of the locker room, as Urban Meyer loved to trumpet that. No offense to Luke Farrell, no offense to Chris Manhurts, was a blocker, but you just had basically one functional, in terms of offensive plug in that. I mean, nobody was scared by Luke Farrell. Nobody was scared by Dan Arnold. Nobody was definitely not scared of Chris Manhertz. So you've got to draft a tight end to me. I mean, to build for the future, to unlock this offense of what Doug Peterson wants to do, what he did in Philadelphia, that versatility of having 2 tight ends, 2 pass-catching tight ends, is what that offense is.
And you got to have 2 tight ends that can also run block, because the ideal situation of when you have those 2 tight ends on the field is you want to force the other defense to have to put their base personnel out there, and one of those tight ends, i.e. Evan Ingram, to really be a mismatch on a linebacker. And then you say, well, if you don't come out in a heavier set on defense, we're just going to run the ball down your throat. We need a road grader, but you also need a road grader who can also double as a pass catcher. It's a very delicate balance there, but the Jaguars are going to be playing with that balance if they can get that second tight end, because they also have 3 very good receivers that are paid as starters in the NFL. So the goal is to put as many weapons at Doug Peterson's disposal as possible. If we look at the offense, I'd say, you want to add, like right now, I expect Evan Ingram back, but you say tight end's a big need. I expect at this point Jawan Taylor to be back, but if he's not back, I'd say left guard's a big need, which is weird because I say if a right tackle's back, then guard's not as big a need. But if Jawan Taylor comes back, I fully expect they're going to try and get Walker Little to earn the starting left guard spot, and then if somebody gets hurt, then you pop him out to tackle. If Jawan Taylor's not back, then Walker Little goes to that right tackle spot. Yeah, and then that opens up that spot. So I just wanted to clarify that because I know that sounded weird. I think you need a second running back.
And a running back, a straight ahead kind of running.
Yeah.
I really lost that when you lost to James Robinson.
Yeah.
Travis Etienne is not that.
He's not. You need a guy that's not going to take a bunch of work away from Travis, because Travis is still such an impactful player. So you need that. I think wide receiver, I know a lot of people want these like big threat. It's fun to talk about adding these dynamic wide receivers, and I just don't see the Jaguars really being in the market for that. With Calvin Ridley coming in, they're so big on continuity. Zay Jones is being paid like a starting receiver in the NFL. So if they bring in someone else, draft someone else, that creates this dynamic of how much money do they have invested at wide receiver already? How many resources do they have for the results that they could be getting back from it? Don't get me wrong. I think they need a big-bodied 50-50 ball guy. I just don't think that's like a first-round pick, and I also don't think it's like a big-money free agent or a dynamic trade. Like if they got T. Higgins, they'd have to send somebody out with that to kind of make it make sense for them. I don't think the Bengals are going to trade him. On the defense. On the defensive that's where things kind of get a little wonky, because there's definitely some needs there for that defense as far as being able to stop a quarterback like Pat Mahomes. Yeah, so the defense, you got to have the pieces in order to stop that quarterback, and without that, we saw what he was able to do. So that means improving the pass rush, big need. And you got to get a nickel corner, because I like Tyson Campbell. I like what Darius Williams was able to do on the outside, but that nickel cornerback spot is definitely a spot that can be improved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need. I mean, Darius Williams played fantastic after the Shaq Griffin went out for the season, but I think you got to have that running mate. You got to have that running mate opposite Tyson Campbell. Tyson looks like a star.
Yeah.
Heading into year 3, so I think if you could package him with another young guy. And if that's not Darius Williams, it's got to be a drafted guy. And I think we'll get to that in a minute. But I think cornerback is a big need as well. I mean, maybe first round.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive into our mock draft and see what we can come up with. So we've got the PFF simulator running. We're going to run 2 of them at the same time. We are starting these up right now, and we've landed on the Jaguars pick. And let's look at the players that are on the board. Some of the guys on both, the one guy that's at the top of both boards for PFF is Deonte Banks, cornerback from Maryland. Then we've got Dalton Kincaid on one, Andre Carter on another one, Nolan Smith is there, Bijan Robinson, Michael Mayer, who I know is a favorite of a lot of folks out there. So there's some talented players. We can kind of go down the board. I know you wanted to you had a little nugget about Anton Harrison, who's on the board on both of these right now.
The Jaguars.com has been compiling a list of mock drafts, if you will, from going back to December until now, and they've run 45 different mock drafts, and some of those have been just updated guys repicking the draft later on. And Anton Harrison was the guy who was mentioned, offensive tackle from Oklahoma, was mentioned the most among those guys that would fit well in Jacksonville. And the reason there would be, I'm assuming, is Jawan Taylor factor.
Right. If you think Jawan's gone,
he's going to be a potential guy to do that. Another guy who's been mentioned a lot is Michael Mayer, Antonio Harrison, safety. So there's been some familiarity with a lot of these mocks where they're mocking maybe 3 to 4 guys consistently to the Jaguars.
Correct.
Among that. So among the 45 selections in those mock drafts dating back a couple months, 45 selections, 29 have either been tight end, safety, or cornerback.
Right.
So there seems to be a pattern that kind of like we talked about. You package Tyson with a high running mate at that opposite corner spot, or you add a tight end to the mix to grow and conceivably give Doug Peterson the talent to run those 2 tight end formations that he likes. So certainly the mock drafters, the draft nicks have zoned in on some targets.
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty decent board of guys available. I'm going to have you figure out how to turn. Can you flip the computer up? I don't know. I think the Suns are doing something, and their mascot started dancing on the computer next to us. Kind of strange at this point. I don't know if you could hear the music going in the background here. All right, there we go. Yeah, I saw the mascot. I was like, what's going on here? All right. So here's the couple of the guys that are on the board that kind of jump out to me. The first one's Andre Carter from Army. Lit up the stat sheet with sacks. But the thing that I've been mentioning him is like connected to Trent Baalke, just in conversation for a while, because dude's 6'7", 260, and Trent talks like a lot about traits, and the same thing that drew him to Trayvon is something that I think is gonna like make diamonds dance in his head when he starts to think about this guy Andre Carter. Is he's 6'7". I think he actually weighed in at the Senior Bowl closer to 250. I'd have to go back and check that, but he looks skinny. Like if you get him in an NFL weight program, he's going to put on weight. He looks like he could add another 20 pounds. And if he can keep the same athleticism that people expect that he has, he should test well at the combine. And if he went to Army, he's not going to be a problem off the field. He's going to be a good locker room guy. I think Andre Carter is going to be a little high on their board, but I don't know if I could bring myself for them to pick him here.
Yeah, I don't know if I go with Andre Carter. I think there's some other options on our draft board here that are a little bit, they say more appealing, but I do think it fits. I mean, Jacksonville needs a pass rush. We saw that points blank period in the Chiefs divisional game. You've got to be able to put pressure on that quarterback. You've got to be able to do it. And Jacksonville did not do that. And I think a little bit of that, it is, what defense are you going to run?
Correct.
What are you going to be? Are you going to have Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen at defensive end and rushing the quarterback? Is Zach, to me, I think that's more of their natural position.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jacksonville is more suited to run that defense where you have that base 4-3 defense and you got the 2 defensive ends, and then you got the linebackers. You got a Chad Muma on the field alongside Foyer. You got Devin Lloyd on the field. The ability to have all those good linebackers on the field at once, and your young defensive ends, and Josh Allen was coming up on his 5th-year option, and then Trayvon Walker. And I mean, Trayvon is a game changer. To me, he looks more natural on that defensive line. So I think pass rush needs some help, but I do think Jacksonville needs to decide first on what their personnel is going to look like.
Right.
You can't draft an Andre Carter if you're going to run that 3-4. I mean, I
think he could stand up. He could stand up if they needed him to. He could be a 3-4 end or a 3-4 outside linebacker. I think
you're talking about you're adding another guy to the mix of a Josh Allen, a Trayvon Walker situation.
This is where we're getting to with the Jaguars, and we have to kind of shift the thinking, which is what's interesting here. Because once you start getting to in this good team territory, maybe by the time you roll up on the draft, they always talk about best player available, but then there's also best player available at a position of need. Now, keep in mind, position of need isn't always a need today. Maybe you're drafting for a need tomorrow, like Josh Allen's replacement, because he is on the last year of his deal. And if I'm Trent Baalke and I'm saying, I don't know if I want to hand Josh Allen $100 million. I know he's a good locker room guy, but is he the $100 million player on the field? And if I don't give that to him, somebody else will, because he's young and athletic and a good locker room leader. somebody will pay him and hope for the upside there, but do you want it to be the Jaguars? And if Trent says, I don't think I do, is it better to draft his replacement today? That way, when they have to be the full-time guy, they're in year 2,
Right.
rather than drafting a rookie that you don't know what you're getting. So you got to start like with some of my things where I'm looking at these first-round picks and like even in Antonio Johnson, who I am a stan of. I love the guy from Texas A&M. I think people are going to start talking about him more after he runs at the combine at 6'3" something. He's going to run like a 4'4". I think people are going to talk about him a lot more soon, but that's projecting ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, he would be the Jaguars' third safety, maybe their nickel corner or their slot defender, as you can call it, whatever. But next year, technically, Rayshon Jenkins, you could cut him, save some money, and then move Johnson into a starting role. So some of it is projecting ahead because you want to kind of spot fill the needs on your football team that you see in free agency. So I would expect that Evan Ingram's going to be back, that they're going to bring in another tight end in free agency and say, okay, we're good for this year, but because you don't want to go into the draft and say, man, if we don't get a corner that can start right now at 24, like, because you don't know who's going to be on the board. Like, if for whatever reason Joey Porter falls to them at 24, great, like you got a cornerback, but you can't go there and be like, oh, Joey Porter's going to be there. Like, you don't know. You don't know. So that's when you start getting these later portions of the draft. Like I start thinking a year in advance and say, Josh Allen's a year out. If you don't bring him back, do you draft his replacement? Rayshon Jenkins, technically he's got 2 years left on his deal. I like Rayshon, but if you wanted to alleviate yourself and save some cap space, which they are going to have to start doing at times, do you draft his replacement? Devon Hamilton, another guy who's going to be nearing the end of his contract. He's been very good for the Jaguars. How much do you want to invest in him? Brandon Sheriff, technically you use Cam Robinson. We have these conversations all the time of like, when could the Jaguars get out of some of these high-paying deals with older players? Well, that's not saying that they need to get rid of them or that they have to, but do you find a way to bring in a replacement? Like, do you spend a third-round pick on a guy who could eventually be Brandon Sheriff's replacement when he move on from his contract? So that's where I look at an Andre Carter is like, yes, you need 3 good pass rushers in the NFL. I fully believe that. And I think Trayvon can slide inside, and then you can have Trayvon, Josh, and an Andre Carter or Will McDonald or whoever all on the field at the same time. But I also look at it and say, well, if Josh isn't back, now you're not, because think about it. Like next year, if they let Josh walk, people are going to be freaking out. Like, what do we do now? Who's going to be the guy? Who's going to replace him? But if they draft somebody here, people are going to be like, pass rush, yeah. And then now when Josh walks, you're like, we're good. Right. So
that's, I don't know. I think you need to decide what's good this defense is going to look like. And I don't know, would I be upset with Andre Carter? No, I don't think so.
No, I do think a first-round pick is a little high on him, but this is a draft where I don't know that there's 32 guys that you give a first-round grade to. So I think
the pick? No?
I'm not making Andre Carter the pick though.
Okay.
So I think if we're going based on our conversation to start, we're going based on what we know about the roster right now. If the biggest need is tight end, I think the question is between the 2 tight ends on the board, right? Mm-hmm. So it'd be between Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid. So it's almost like a what's your flavor kind of pick.
I would go with Michael.
Go Michael Mayer,
be my guy. I know that's not fair. I know that's not your flavor, but I'm gonna pick Michael Mayer at 24.
We can do there. We'll do Michael Mayer. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Michael Mayer hater. He's a high floor player. I think if you pick him, you very well know you're going to get a starter in the National Football League or a player who can contribute to your team in the National Football League for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
Very well. But I don't think he's necessarily going to be an impact player. Like, I don't think, somebody was comparing Michael Mayer to Mercedes Lewis once upon a time. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like, Mercedes Lewis was a great player, and I know he lives in the hearts of a lot of Jaguars fans out there, but nobody's looking at the game today like, you know what this team needs? Mercedes Lewis. That'll get into the Super Bowl. That's not a shot at him.
He was just kind of he stuck around forever. He was serviceable. He was kind of an average player.
And that's what I think Michael Mayer will be.
And to me, I would have loved it if I've heard comps, and I think this is off but T.J. Hawkinson and Michael Mayer. And I don't think that
they are.
That's it. But I think if you could get that receiving, blocking tight end and you let him develop with an Evan Ingram, I think that's good. Evan is going to be a pricey guy. He has said we need to get to the point where we're not getting these guys on second contracts. We're not having to spend in free agency. We want these guys, want to draft and develop. Down is cost controlled for 5 years. And this is a situation where you get a guy, Michael Mayer, who could come in and run that 2 tight end formation and with Evan Ingram and kind of be that, get to that point where Evan's at the last year of his deal and Michael Mayer is ready to kind of supersede him. Sorry. I like Michael Mayer at number 20.
And don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think I like Dalton Kincaid a little bit better than I like Michael Mayer, but I don't think you could pair Dalton Kincaid and Evan Ingram on a team. Like, they're just too similar of players. It wouldn't have worked. So
Luke Musgrave would be the other.
And Luke Musgrave is another guy that's in a conversation, but he's also a guy that I'm not sure if you can pair him and Evan Ingram, similar enough games where neither one of them is a dominating blocker. If you're looking for a dominating blocker, you got to go like Mayer or Washington from Georgia, which if you could get him in the second round, that'd be like my sweet spot steal. But, okay, so we went with Michael Mayer in the first round. So then we go to the second round, and we've got a few different players on these boards. These boards actually look a little bit different. So we've got a cornerback at the top of one, Garrett Wilson from Syracuse. Pretty good player. Could be helpful. Jahmyr Gibbs, a running back. I actually covered him at Dalton High School. So I'd love for Gibbs to land at the Jaguars. Don't think he will, but yeah. Siaki Ika, a big nose tackle. He's an interesting player from Baylor. I think he probably will be in our conversation here in a second because we got to talk about bolstering the D-line. Since we took a tight end, we're not going to talk about Sam Laporta. There's Sidney Brown, the safety from Illinois. Trenton Simpson, linebacker from Clemson. Running back Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. Stop me if you see anybody here that's jumping out to you. Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame, if you want to go back to the Fighting Irish well there. Jalen Hyatt still on the board. I don't think he'll make it this far though. And then the one guy there's Darnell Washington was still on the board. And this is the Jaguars' second
board, a corner.
Cam Smith is still here. I don't know if he'll make it this far either. If he runs well, he won't. The guy that so for me, if I'm going to narrow this board down to a couple of guys, I like Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. He had a really big week at the Senior Bowl, and I think the Jaguars really need to bolster that D line, specifically finding a way to get some sort of interior pass rush, especially knowing you went offense with that first pick. I'm thinking you'd go defense here. So I would narrow the board down to Siaki Ika from Baylor, Garrett Wilson, the corner from Syracuse, and probably Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, and say you either get a big defensive lineman or you take a corner.
I like the bolster that defensive line.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, you mentioned to preface this with the Hamilton getting up there.
Foley Fatukasi missed a lot of time with injuries. Roy Robertson Harris is a contract, possible cut situation kind of guy. If you go to that 4-3, who are your interior? Who's your two pairings at defensive tackle?
You're hoping that's. If Roy Robertson Harris is back, maybe him. But now it's Devon Hamilton,
and Devon's very good. I love Devon. I think they have to find a way to keep the big run stuffer, but you need some pass rush juice on the inside. So all right, if we're looking for pass rush juice, Siaki Ika is an interesting one because he's kind of like he's a big nose tackle, 350 pounds, but he's not like a big nose tackle run stopper. He's very finesse, likes to get after the passer kind of guy. And Keanu Benton is a guy that he didn't show a lot of pass rush early in his career at Wisconsin, but his final year he showed a lot more, and then at the Senior Bowl was getting after it. I think raised his stock a lot. So I don't think you go wrong really with either one of them as long as you understand what you're getting in the player. Like if they draft Ika and think he's going to do the same thing that Devon Hamilton does for him, that'll be very bad. So I'll give you the wheel here and let you pick between the two. You want to go Baylor or Wisconsin?
I'm going to say Siaka.
You want to all right?
Take that. Big guy. You need some bodies on the line. You saw what. All right. Last year when you didn't have a Devon Hamilton, when you didn't have a Roy, when you didn't have you didn't have that girth on that defensive line. Yep. Dewan Smoot, hurt, missed a year after that Achilles. I think you need that muscle. I think you need that penetration on the defensive line. And you mentioned, again, Devon Hamilton, contract guy. Foley was banged up. And, with his loss last year, you felt that, immensely in the run game. So I think Siaka is my guy here, just adding on the defensive line. I like that. I know Washington, he's in that second round. But again, we've already got Michael Mayer. I think he's the best tight end.
So far we've got Mayer, and then we went Ika in the second round. And if you paired Ika and Devon Hamilton on the inside, which again, very different players, but you get 2 350-pound guys there, I mean, that's a good defensive line.
Right.
And ideally what Ika can give you is a penetrating defensive tackle and the powerful guy. And that's, he's I'm trying to think about how to like describe him. Like, he's 350 pounds, but he's not like a power player. He's almost like a finesse player who likes to, like, he knows how to get skinny and like get into the backfield. And if you can get that, where you can get that push in the middle to set up Trayvon and set up Josh Allen, then you're in a good space. So I think that pick can work. So now we've got Mayer and we've got Ika, and then we're moving on to our third round. And so we filled a couple of holes, but there's still some that are available here. And let's look at our board. So we got a running back from Auburn, Tank Bigsby here. We've got J.L. Skinner, a safety from Boise State, who's still on the board. Kendre Miller, a running back from TCU. Jaden Reed, wide receiver from Michigan State. Cody Mock, tackle from North Dakota State's there. Let's see. I don't think he'll be there, so we ain't going to go down that rabbit hole. Dorian Williams, a linebacker from Tulane's on the board. Tajay Spears, I love Tajay Spears, running back from Tulane. If you haven't watched his highlight tapes, go watch it because he's fun. I like, a dream scenario for me is if they drafted Spears and paired him and Travis Etienne together. It would give you like no sort of power in the running game. You'd have to hope that Snoop Conner can be like your 1 yard and cloud of dust kind of player. But my goodness, like a 2 yard dump off pass might turn into 30 at any given moment. It would be fun. Let's see who else we got. Isaiah McGuire, an edge from Missouri's out there. Kyrell Clark, a cornerback from Louisville. A.T. Perry's an interesting one, big wide receiver. He runs well at the combine. His stock will go up. But he's the big body kind of guy that we were talking about before that they could use. Byron Young, and a defensive end from Tennessee. He could be a good one. He has a very interesting story. If you don't know about Byron Young, we may get into that here in a second. And then Cedric Tillman, a wide receiver from Tennessee's on the board. Any names jumping out to me here?
I don't know. I mean, defensive back, safety would be another spot to me where Cam Smith was in there. Second round, he's off the board now. Yeah. He would have been a guy that I would have entertained the thought, even in the second round. I don't think he falls that far. I do think Cam Smith would be a great pick, but again, he's off the board now. So I'm going to say safety, cornerback is something.
Putting books there, okay.
At this point, when you're inside the top 3 rounds, Jags have certainly got to address cornerbacks again. Shaq Griffin is not going to be back. Your corners from last year, the last couple years draft, just not there. You have something with Darius Williams, but you have to have a third. You mentioned Rayshon Jenkins as far as a future guy planning for the future. If Rayshon can have another year like this year, wow, he had a phenomenal year. But you have to plan now for cornerback safety help. And again, mentioned beginning of this with all the mocks. I mean, 15 mock drafts, 15 of 45 since the first couple months of the year have gone with corner safety help for Jacksonville. So I think corner or safety makes the most sense of this position.
Yeah, it's just about finding kind of the value. So I'll give you the 3 guys that jump off at me on this thing. I like Byron Young from Tennessee. That would give you another kind of edge defensive end guy. We got the big defensive tackle. Byron Young, interesting story there. So he wasn't a big-time recruit coming out of high school. Actually was out of football, was working at like a Dollar General or something. Saw a flyer for, I think it was like Georgia Military Academy or something. So goes JUCO, works out for him, ends up at Tennessee. So he's a little bit older. He's like 25 and going to be a rookie going in the NFL. But he's a guy who definitely is going to value every opportunity he gets. A.T. Perry, I like him. He gives you the size. Like, I like to think of the wide receiver group as like a basketball team. Right now, the Jaguars don't have a center. Right. And A.T. Perry would give you that with the kind of size that he would bring to the field. So I think he definitely should be in the conversation. Last guy, if you want to go corner, like you were mentioning, I think Jalen Jones makes a whole lot of sense from Texas A&M. He can do a little bit of things for you. He has good size at 6'2", 205. I think overall it was just kind of a rough season for Texas A&M down there at College Station. So, it's understandable or easy to understand why guys like Jones and even Antonio Johnson, who another guy I like is, didn't have maybe the seasons that people expected them to have. So we can go with any of those three. I think they're all on the board on both sets. So we can go corner, wide receiver, or edge. What you got?
Man, I'm going to go, I've loved receiver, talking about receiver.
Sure. Pivoting from it, though, can't bring yourself to it?
I just don't think so. I mean, with Ridley and to me, and I go back to last year with the Muma selection.
Sure.
You Devin Lloyd in the first round, Trayvon number 1 overall, and then you go back at Foye in free agency, and then Muma was the day 3 pick. To me, it was just too much at that position. So I think receiver, you maybe draft a project in the latter rounds this year, but I think in the 3rd round this year, I think you need to go with a guy who could be a starter. Could be a starter right now, and I think that to me is a cornerback. I think they need the most help there in the secondary. So I'm gonna go with the Jalen Jones type of situation there. I think he's a big guy. You package him with another SEC corner and Tyson Campbell, and I think that's got the good makings of the young and talented secondary.
All right, so that wraps up our 3-round mock. So we got Michael Mayer in the first, Siaki Ika in the second, and then Jalen Jones in the third. So that's a tight end, a defensive tackle, and then a cornerback. Based on our PFF grades, they liked our 2nd and 3rd round pick. Gave us B's on both of those. They were not a fan of the Michael Mayer pick. So PFF tends to side with me a little bit more.
Jamal has been a fan of Michael Mayer.
When I look at a 1st-round player, like I tend to think of the word prospect. Like, I know Michael Mayer is a safe pick. I know he's not going to, like, in the 2nd round, I love Michael Mayer. You know what you're going to get, but I don't want to, I feel like Doctor Strange sometimes in, like, what was it, Infinity War, where he was looking at all the futures, and I'm like, there's just so few of them where I feel like Michael Mayer turns into a superstar. Like, I don't think he's baby Gronk. I don't think he's Travis Kelce Jr. I don't really think he's going to run very well in, like, the 40-yard dash. I think he's a very good football player. Like, I was listening to somebody compared him to Heath Miller, and I don't know if you remember the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end.
Average?
He was a good player. Is he a guy that I want a 1st round in today's NFL? No, he's not. But in the 2nd round, I would love a Heath Miller clone. So that's where, like, my train of thought, like Dalton Kincaid, like if you said Evan Ingram walks and you're like Dalton Kincaid, I'm like, I can see Dalton Kincaid being Mark Andrews 2.0, a superstar pass catching tight end in the NFL.
I'm with Washington out of Georgia in the 2nd round. In this mock, we could have had him in round 2.
And he's a guy who's growing on me because I was so anti-Washington early on. Washington and Mayer were like on my hate list. And then I started thinking more about it and watching him more, and I'm like, you can't teach size. And that's just planet theory. Just get the biggest, baddest dudes and put them on the field. And having a guy with his sort of size and athleticism, and no, he didn't catch a lot of passes at Georgia. And in the NFL, he probably will never catch a lot of passes. But, like, when I look at it, like, who's going to be a better run blocker between Michael Mayer and Darrell Washington? I'm pretty sure it's going to be Washington. So, like, when I start saying, all right, well, if they bring back Evan Ingram, what tight end do I want to pair with him that really helps take the Jaguars 2 tight end sets to the next level? And I say, you pull Ingram on one side, who they're like, wow, we can't cover this dude with a linebacker. And you put Washington on the other side, they're like, if they come out in a nickel defense to try and match up with Ingram, and Washington gets a block on your cornerback, it's over with. That kid's on the ground. He's dead. So I'm like, oh, that could be good because his size is going to force teams to really, like, fear him in the running game. And on top of that, like, I don't think he's, like, very nimble-footed, but if you put him in a situation where for whatever reason he straight line, I mean, dude's fast. He's fast. So
he is like a Trayvon Walker. That he's a guy who is that diamond in the rough they're hoping for. He's a guy you're going to need to develop, who's not going to come in the league day one and be a Travis Kelce kind of type. He's got refinement.
Yeah, I don't know that he'll ever be that. I really don't. I don't know that he'll ever be a Travis Kelce kind of receiving threat. I don't even know if he makes it to, like, Dallas Goedert levels, but I think he's going to I think his floor is he's going to be a road grader in the run game. And could he be a reliable pass catching threat? Yeah. I mean, I think he could be. and he should be. Looks like he has good hands, and he's fast enough that if defenses sleep on him, he's going to run by your guy. So I think that the idea of him has grown on me. I still don't think I just don't think he's very nimble-footed. And like when you look at Travis Kelce, you don't see like this big lumbering, like large. You don't feel like he's a large human. Right. When I watch Washington run, I feel like he's large.
Yeah.
Like I can see it, and I'm like, okay. So I that's why I just don't know that he'll ever be a dynamic receiving threat. Could be wrong.
And Jacksonville needs that. Again, you're not going to run the tight end formations that you want with Luke Farrell and Evan Ingram.
Right.
He's not going to do it. And Doug Peterson needs that. Again, you want to have that. I keep saying Travis Kelce, but you see what element he brings to a Chiefs offense.
He does.
And
he does.
It's amazing to have the ability, not with one player, but with two players, to have that flex where you're able to run with a Mayer or an Evan Ingram, something, a Musgrave, something like that, where you can not get a Travis Kelce kind of guy in one player, but have that production come in two players. And I think you need to unlock those offense. You need another tight end with Evan Ingram.
Yeah, and having the flexibility to go between a 3 wide receiver set and a 2 tight end set should give the Jaguars a lot of flexibility. I don't oppose the Mayer pick. I'm just not a huge Mayer fan, even in the late stages of the first round. I think there are other tight ends in the draft that jump out to me better, depending on the situation.
1.0.
Yeah, this is 1.0. We'll do a few more. We'll do a few more, but I do think like if the Jaguars walked away with this class from the first 3 rounds, I would not be upset.
I would not. Yeah.
I could look at this and say I see what they were going for. I see the vision, and it makes sense. So while I may not be sold on the first round pick, I do like the second and third. But I can understand Michael Mayer. Like Michael Mayer is for me. If you pick him, it's like a C. It's basically what PFF gave us. He gave us a C. It's all
minus.
Yeah, they said a C minus. I give it a C because he's a high floor player, and I just don't know where the ceiling is. It's the same conversation we had about Aiden Hutchinson last year. Like, you know what you're gonna get, but like, how high can it get? I don't know. So, all right, this wraps up our first kind of mock draft. Let us know on social media in the comments over on News4Jags.com what you think about our 3 picks. If you liked Mayer, Siaki Ika, Jalen Jones, if you would have done something different, let us know what your mock drafts are looking like. We'll do a few more of these. I think next time we sit down to talk, we'll talk some free agents that should be on your radar for the Jaguars as we kind of start the journey through the offseason.
Just about 1 month out from just about today that the NFL offseason or the new season year, league year begins.
Yeah.
March 15th. So March 15th, Jacksonville's going to be signing some guys and not writing out blank checks like they did last year. Be much more conservative in free agency this year. March 15th, big day.
Yeah, I got a stack of papers and work to do before then, so on my desk. So I got to get to that at some point. But thanks for tuning into the News4Jags podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, get back at us, go fire us down on social media, and let us know your thoughts on our mock draft, and we'll see you next time.